In Star Wars, it was a symbol of the Rebel Alliance, a starfighter that Luke Skywalker used to blow up the Death Star, and an iconic piece of machinery. It stood for rebellion, for fighting against oppressors, for destroying the evil empire that wants to take over the galaxy. We're talking, of course, about the X-Wing. And how fitting it is that a drone that Ukraine is about to receive has been given the same name. Where the X-Wing played a vital role for the Rebel Alliance in Star Wars, this insane experimental weapon that Lithuania just gave Ukraine will leave Russia shocked and its soldiers terrified. Lithuania was among the first to report on this bold new weapon. On October 9th, the outlet said that the Lithuanian defense company Granta Autonomy has officially unveiled a new loitering munition called the X-Wing. A vertical takeoff and landing or VTOL drone, the X-Wing has undergone extensive testing since the spring of 2025, with Granta Autonomy stating that its key capabilities are confirmed as ready to go. And that new drone is heading to Ukraine. A small series of X-Wings is currently being manufactured and delivered for additional trials to frontline units of the armed forces of Ukraine, Granta Autonomy founder and CEO Guoba told Lithuania. Continuous operational use at the front is being used as part of the system's validation. In other words, Granta has taken its new drone as far as it can with laboratory testing. It now needs to prove itself in combat. And having Ukraine deploy this experimental drone is the perfect way to determine how effective it can be against an enemy that Lithuania believes may soon pose as much of a threat to its territory as it does to Ukraine. United 24 media also reported on the incoming X-Wing, noting that the initial deployment of this experimental drone will be limited. However, Granta is working on building up to mass production, assuming the combat testing about to be carried out by Ukraine proves successful. By the beginning of next year, Granta expects to have scaled up to the point where it's producing several hundred of these interesting airframes per month. If everything goes as Granta and Ukraine hope it will go, then 2026 may become the year that Ukraine is able to use a weapon that carries a very symbolic name to fight back against a nation that seems bent on domination. But first, Ukraine needs to find out if the X-Wing lives up to its billing. And at first glance, Lithuania's new drone seems like a very impressive piece of kit. The basics come from Lithuania, which says that the drone is interesting because it combines the VTOL capabilities of a typical quadcopter drone with cruise flight that is enabled by its X-shaped wings. The ability to cruise means that the X-Wing can travel over greater distances using less energy in cruise mode compared with other small unmanned aerial vehicles Ukraine is using against Russia. Cruising capability also means that drone operators will gain the ability to fire on Russian targets without requiring any sort of special infrastructure. As for technical specifications, Guoba offers one of the most important. An endurance range of 50 kilometers is the initial specification, which will be improved. However, we will consistently balance the extended capabilities of the X-Wing with its production cost, Guoba told Lithuania in October. That amounts to about 31 miles, which is over twice the 12-mile range of the average FPV drone, per an October 9th Forbes article. The X-Wing won't be limited by fiber optic cables either, which gives it a clear advantage over those kinds of drones. Plus, pay attention to what Guoba said, 50 kilometers is the baseline. Further development will follow the testing phase that is about to take place in Ukraine, meaning later versions of the X-Wing will be able to travel even further. Lithuania may have just handed Ukraine a drone that could change the entire complexion of the battlefield. Medium-range strikes conducted from relative safety could now be possible. At the farthest edge of its range, an X-Wing could strike a Russian target while leaving its operators with plenty of time to evacuate before a Russian response can arrive. Beyond that, we know that the drone can carry an explosive payload weighing about 4 kilograms, which is roughly equivalent to 8.8 pounds. It's also pretty fast, capable of reaching speeds of up to 144 kilometers or 89 miles per hour. That speed is important. Slow-moving drones are vulnerable to everything from air defenses to small arms fire. A drone that rockets along at almost 90 miles per hour is very difficult to hit, especially if it's flying so low to the ground that air defense radars aren't able to pick up on its presence. Other important features include a combination of daytime optics and a thermal imager, making the drones usable 24 hours per day. That capability comes from Granta's micro-gimbal camera, which has also been built to continue operating in environments where global navigation systems have been denied or jammed. So an X-Wing operator can maintain control at all times, regardless of the many electronic warfare tricks that Russia attempts to pull from its sleeve. We also can't ignore the Granta data link communication system. Granta has already ensured that this system is capable of communicating directly with the standard ground stations currently used in Ukraine. The base version of the X-Wing also makes use of some artificial intelligence or AI. Its guidance system incorporates some AI elements that allow it to identify and target camouflaged assets on the ground. This combination of features makes the X-Wing a nightmare for Russia's forces. What Ukraine is about to receive is an experimental drone that combines speed and agility to make it capable of evading Russia's countermeasures. The warhead employed by the drone is also versatile thanks to its fragmentation properties. That means Ukraine can use the X-Wing to tackle personnel, lightly armored vehicles, and even radar stations. The latter would allow Ukraine to enjoy the ultimate irony of taking out the eyes of the very systems that are supposed to be shooting its drones out of the sky. The X-Wing nightmare will get even worse for Russia in the future. Granta says that it's currently working on introducing full swarm autonomy via a mesh network to its drones. With that technology in place, Ukraine would gain the ability to launch full swarms of X-Wings that can operate independently of human interference and in tandem with other X-Wing drones that are connected to the same network. Swarm technology utilizes AI in far more interesting and devastating ways than simply empowering a drone to identify hidden targets. The Wall Street Journal has reported on this emerging tech, claiming that it's the next frontier of drone warfare because of the sheer amount of potential that swarms offer. In theory, a swarm network could allow the user to link thousands of drones together into a single network, all of which can be used to overwhelm the defenses of a target. Even dozens in a swarm would cause major problems for Russia's soldiers. Imagine 20 or 30 X-Wing drones, all flying almost as one, though also intelligent enough to fly in a formation that makes it difficult for air defenses to take them down. Those drones are all zeroed in on a single target, and they'll fly at that target all at once and from many different angles to ensure a direct hit. That's the sort of threat that Granta wants to build into its X-Wing drones, but it isn't quite there yet. We'll dig a little deeper into the impact that drone swarms could have on the Ukraine war later in the video, but for now, we'll conclude our examination of Granta's X-Wing with a single number: 10,000 euros. That's how many euros Granta claims a single X-Wing costs to build. That translates to roughly $11,560, which is a tiny price to pay for a drone that is capable of causing as much damage as Lithuania's experimental weapon. This price tag comes with the caveat that later versions of the drone, particularly those that incorporate swarm technology, will cost more. But for an already impressive baseline version of the X-Wing, a little over $11,000 seems like an absolute steal. It certainly compares favorably to the sorts of targets the X-Wing is designed to take out. In 2025, a single soldier costs Russia $31,200 per year, based on an October CNN estimate that a first-year contract soldier fighting in Ukraine earns about $2,600 per month. That's without counting for the lump sum that recruits receive just for signing up for Russia's military in the first place. These one-off payments can be as high as $36,560 in some regions, which is added to a $4,900 payment the soldiers get from Russia's federal government and the wages we just mentioned. An X-Wing that takes out a single Russian soldier will cost Russia over $70,000. Ukraine will spend just $11,000. And if the new drone is as effective at taking out lightly armored targets and radar systems as Granta claims it is, the cost of Russia's losses could end up in the millions for a comparatively tiny outlay on Ukraine's part. To temper all of this, it's important to reiterate that the X-Wing is still in a testing period. Though it's proven itself in the Granta labs, Ukraine still has to discover if the new drone's range of features makes it a viable asset on the battlefield. Based on what Granta has said, it seems likely that the rest of 2025 will be dedicated to combat testing the new drone, with the increased production plan for 2026 gearing up if and when the new X-Wing proves itself in Ukraine. Assuming the X-Wing is everything that Granta claims it to be, it's going to have some interesting company on the battlefield. For one, there's a drone that Ukraine itself has built that bears a striking resemblance to Lithuania's experimental drone. Dubbed the Flycat, this drone was unveiled by Octava Defense in July, and it features similar capabilities to Granta's drone. These include the ability to loiter autonomously, identify targets, and conduct kamikaze strikes, all without relying on any form of satellite navigation. The warhead is a little smaller in this Ukrainian X-Wing drone, and the Flycat is also a touch slower and has a shorter range. Still, the combination of these two drones will be the last thing Russia's forces would want to see on the battlefield. United 24 also reports that Ukraine has just completed a successful test of its new Zhuk drone, just days before Granta announced that the X-Wing will be arriving in Ukraine. Also a fixed-wing loitering drone, though with a more conventional design than the X-Wing, the Zhuk has managed to hit targets at distances exceeding 40 kilometers while wading through a host of electrical interference. That's the point. The drone, which was designed by a company called Autonomy, was made specifically to counter Russia's electronic warfare countermeasures. One test of the Zhuk saw it reach a target 67 kilometers or 41 miles away, showcasing that Ukraine is just as capable of developing loitering munitions as its partners. Not that any of this means that Ukraine doesn't want Granta's X-Wing. Rather, the point we're making here is that these drones indicate several trends that are leading Ukraine to the next evolution of its drone warfare strategy. It's not just about sheer numbers anymore, though having many more drones on the battlefield than Russia is still extremely important. These drones showcase a focus on overcoming electronic countermeasures to ensure the drones hit their targets no matter how hard Russia tries to jam their signals. We're also seeing a shift toward autonomous target detection and striking, which makes a drone operator's job a lot easier. Plus, all three of these drones have impressive ranges, with the X-Wing coming out on top, which could allow Ukraine to deploy them behind frontline positions so it can strike Russia in the near rear. The X-Wing is just a part of a burgeoning drone evolution in Ukraine, and its arrival means several bad things for Russia. The potential for Ukraine to start using drone swarms is one of those bad things, albeit one that isn't going to arrive immediately, given that Granta is still developing swarm technology for the X-Wing. Once that technology is in place, Russia will have a serious problem on its hands. We've already touched on why when discussing swarm technology earlier, but it's worth exploring what drone swarms really mean for the Ukraine war. For one thing, swarming allows Ukraine to do something similar to Russia's human wave assaults, only using drones. Forces News spoke to David Hambling in September 2025, who explained an interesting use case for this kind of technology. The attack drones will then come in as a swarm, and between them, they will work out which drones attack which target, so they don't all go with the same target, Hambling says. Immediately we see a key benefit. Ukraine's operators don't have to waste time figuring out what to hit because the AI that powers the swarm does all of that work for them. Less time spent by Ukraine also means less time for Russia to react to incoming drones, which will amount to more effective strikes against multiple targets. Hambling continues, and so you get one drone attacking each target in the first wave. After that, the reconnaissance drones will assess the damage, and then follow-up drones will be assigned to anything that's not destroyed, until all of the targets have been taken out, and the human commander just needs to verify that and say, "Job done, you can return home," he says. It's here where we see the emulation of Russia's human wave tactics come into play. For Putin, human life is expendable enough that he's willing to send wave after wave of soldiers into the meat grinder to destroy a target. Attrition is the goal, but the human cost is immense. With drone swarms, Ukraine can conduct the same kind of assaults using machines instead of people. Multiple waves attack, with each wave following up on what the wave before did. Even if Russia manages to fend off the waves, Ukraine simply loses drones. It doesn't lose people. That's pretty important to Ukraine because, as Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty reported in August, Ukraine is dealing with a creeping soldier shortage. The outlet reports on figures provided by Poland's Center for Eastern Studies, or OSW, which says that Ukraine needs to recruit 300,000 soldiers annually to replenish the losses its brigades have experienced. Ukraine isn't hitting that number. It recruited 200,000 in 2024 and was recruiting between 17 and 24,000 people per month by August 2025. Even at the high end of that range, that amounts to 288,000 recruits, 12,000 shy of the number OSW says Ukraine needs to hit. Drone swarms, along with Ukraine's other unmanned vehicles, may make it so that such heavy recruitment is no longer a necessity. Autonomous drones that can act independently minimize the need for Ukraine to field as many soldiers. That's not to say that drones will replace humans, however, they can certainly fill in the gaps left over by 3.5 years of intense warfare, allowing Ukraine to launch assaults and maintain defenses without risking as many of its people. A lower casualty rate also means that Ukraine doesn't have to recruit as many soldiers. We also can't ignore the impact that the X-Wing will have on Russia, even without its upcoming swarm capabilities. Even the base model is designed to be a death-dealing machine, and Russia could use far less death as it tries to maintain the strength of its assaults against Ukraine. This is a country that has already lost more than 1.12 million people to death, injury, or capture, according to Ukraine's Ministry of Finance, and it's drones that are doing more direct damage to Russia than any other weapon. By April 2025, drones were reported to be the cause of up to 80% of all casualties in the Ukraine war. Army Technology used Russia's casualty figures from April 8th to highlight what this means, noting that drones would have been responsible for 1,000 of the 1,300 losses Russia experienced on that day alone. The sheer number of drones that now roam the Ukrainian battlefield has made it so that there is no safe space for Russia's soldiers, Hambling said on October 9th when writing for Forbes. Hambling discussed how Ukraine has done an excellent job of giving itself a choice of drones that it can use for short, medium, and long-range attacks. Lithuania's X-Wing fits into the middle category, and it will be ideal for creating kill zones in areas of Ukraine that are already occupied by Russia. Thanks to the drone's automated tracking and targeting, Ukraine just needs to deploy some X-Wing drones and leave them to do their thing while it concentrates its people on the combat lines. Any new drone adding to Ukraine's already impressive stockpiles is bad enough for Russia. However, there's also a strange phenomenon that appears to be afflicting Russia's forces right now. On October 8th, the New Voice of Ukraine reported that Russia's ratio of wounded to killed in combat has taken an abnormally high turn. The outlet shares figures published by the Institute for the Study of War, which says that Russia is losing 1 soldier to death for every 1.3 soldiers that are being wounded. The takeaway here is that Ukraine is getting more efficient at killing rather than just maiming Russia's forces. Or, given that up to 80% of casualties are being caused by drones, it's Ukraine's unmanned vehicles that are becoming more efficient. This Russian ratio is notable because a typical ratio is usually somewhere around 1 killed for every 3 injured, as the Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center points out. X-Wing is designed to be a lethal drone, and that's the last thing that Russia's shocked troops want to see when so many more of them are dying. Finally, there's the fact that this drone is coming from Lithuania to consider. Granta has touched on how it's sending X-Wing drones into Ukraine for combat testing. The company doesn't say whether it's charging Ukraine for those drones, but it doesn't really matter. Even if Ukraine is paying, this transfer of technology demonstrates that Ukraine is building a stronger relationship with a Baltic nation that is very wary of what Putin might have planned if he succeeds in Ukraine. Lithuania is so wary of a future Russian invasion that officials in its capital city of Vilnius have already concocted an evacuation plan to be put into place if Putin ever manages to move beyond Ukraine. That plan, which the BBC says details how Lithuania would handle the evacuation of around 540,000 people, is in place because Vilnius is very close to the 422-mile border that Lithuania shares with Belarus. Putin used Belarus as a launchpad for his Ukraine invasion. Lithuania wants to be ready if Russia's leader tries to do the same thing in the future. Any connections that Lithuania and Ukraine forge benefit both. The latter can get access to technology like the X-Wing that it may not have the time or resources to develop itself. The former helps a country upon which it's relying to defeat Russia because Lithuania believes that it may be next if Ukraine falls. The X-Wing isn't going to win the war for Ukraine, of course, but it's yet another piece slotted into place for Ukraine's growing drone army. And when swarm technology is introduced to the drone and Granta has increased its manufacturing capabilities, X-Wing could become the stuff of nightmares for Putin's forces on the front lines in Ukraine. It's also not just Lithuania that's providing Ukraine with weapons. Greece just slapped Putin by sending Ukraine firepower it can use to break Russia. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more coverage of the new and interesting weapons Ukraine deploys in its fight against Russia's invading forces. And thank you, as always, for watching.